Hello, Warhammer 40K players and Imperial Knights players in particular. I am very excited to bring you this video in which we discuss the new released detachment in the 10th edition Imperial Knights Codex, and this is the Spearhead at Arms detachment. This is the Armiger detachment, and this is probably the most beginner friendly, the most brutal. And this detachment will make grown men try like little children, and it can tear assholes bigger than Nicki Minaj at her peak, or Kirstie Alley at her lowest, or highest, if you consider weight. So let's get into this video. Just like my other videos, we're going to go over the detachment rule. We're going to go over the enhancements, the stratagems. Then we're going to move to Excel for some list building and knight and ally recommendations. And then we're going to finish off with some map studies. So the detachment rule. Each time a model from your army uses its bondsman ability, if no other model from your army has used that bondsman ability that turn, you can select up to 3 friendly armiger models instead of 1 within 12 inches of that model or within 15 inches of that model while your army is honored. You still cannot select a model that is already being affected by a bondsman ability. Until the start of your next command phase, those models are affected by that bondsman ability. This is freaking strong. Back in the index, in Noble Lance detachment, there was a enhancement for 25 points that you could give to only Questoris models that could let you bond an extra armiger. Now, this detachment rule lets you bond up to 3 armigers, whether you're using a Questoris or Cerastus chassis. And down here we have keywords. Armiger models from your army gain the battle line keyword. Note that armigers were battle line in the index, but upon the Codex release, armigers lost the battle line keyword, and so this is the only detachment where you can take up to 6 of an armiger. Still, when we talk about list building, I don't recommend that. And the reason why is you need to be bringing some of the big knights, the Titanic characters that have bondsman abilities, and they're quite expensive at around a little less than 400 points. So if you want to include 1 or 2 of those in your army, you're not going to be able to max out armigers. Next up are the enhancements. First one, Mentor's Pride. Imperial Knights model only. While 2 or more armiger models are under the effect of the bearer's bondsman ability, each time each of those armiger models makes an attack, you can reroll a hit roll of 1. This is the best enhancement. It does not specify fighting or shooting. It's in any phase. And it says each time each of those armiger models makes an attack, you can reroll a hit roll of 1. Well, guess what? You can use this in Overwatch too. Fucking strong. Next one, Fables of Nightmare. Imperial Knights model only. While 2 or more armiger models are under the effect of the Bearer's Bondsman ability, melee weapons equipped by those armiger models have the Precision ability. I want some of what the game designers have been consuming because this is crazy. This turns armigers into snipers. And if you choose the deed that requires you to select an enemy character model and destroy it, you can select a character model like an attached leader, something weak. Let's say it's Ursula Creed, and she starts up on the board, not inside a transport. Now you can have precision. Ursula Creed does not have lone op. So you can fire on Ursula Creed on turn 1. And you have precision. So from 48 inches away, an Armiger Helverin can take out Ursula Creed and you can score your oath and become honored and get your CP. That's crazy strong. Do I recommend it? In my list, I don't use it, but against certain armies like Necrons, this is going to be extremely strong. Next one, Tales of Heroism. Imperial Knights model only. While 2 or more Armiger models are under the effects of the Bearer's Bondsman ability, each time one of those Armiger models makes a melee attack, you can ignore any or all modifiers to the hit roll and or the wound roll. This is stupid. The reason why it's stupid is because it only works in melee. Ignoring mods to wound is pretty good against certain armies and certain detachments, but ignore mods is actually best on range weapons because a lot of enemies might have the stealth keyword. I think most tanks have the smoke keyword, meaning they can pay 1 CP. It's a core stratagem. You essentially get stealth on a tank. So ignoring mods to hit or wound in melee is just not that good. And the last one is martial tuition. Imperial Knights model only. While 2 or more Armiger models are under the effects of the Bearer's Bondsman ability, once per turn you can target one of those Armiger models with the counter-offensive stratagem for 0 CP. This is actually pretty good. Now, what the counter-offensive stratagem is it's another core stratagem, and this is what people will call the interrupt. So how the fight phase works is first the opponent, so the player whose turn it is not, gets to fight first with their fight first units. And then the player who charged, they get to fight first with their fight first units. And when you charge, you get fights first. And it goes back to the player whose turn it is not, he gets to fight with his other units. Not all his other units at the same time. He selects a unit, then the other player gets to fight with another unit, then it goes back and forth after that. So an interrupt kind of breaks that cycle. Let's say you didn't charge. You're locked into combat, it's your turn. Unless you have fights first, the opponent gets to activate first. So you can use counteroffensive, and that way you can actually fight before the opponent does. This is actually a decent enhancement, but against gunline armies, you're not going to be able to use it very often. We're going to move on to the stratagems now. The first one is Virtue of Courage. When start of the fight phase, target 1 Armiger model from your army or 1 Imperial Knights Titanic model from your army and 1 or more friendly Armiger models affected by that model's Bondsman ability. Effect: select 1 enemy unit. Until the end of the phase, each time one of your Armiger models makes an attack that targets that enemy unit, add 1 to the hit roll. So this is great. And even though they mention Imperial Knights Titanic model, that Titanic model does not get the ability. It's all the Armigers that the Titanic model has bonded. So let's say you have a Knight Paladin that bonded 3 Warglaves, and all 3 Warglaves charged an enemy demon. You can use this stratagem, and all 3 of the Warglaves, because they were all bonded by the Paladin, gets +1 to their hit roll. Now, if you have 3 Warglaves that charge three different enemies, let's say they charge three different war dogs, and you use this stratagem, it won't work on all three of your warglaves because they charge separate units. It would only affect one of the warglaves against one of the enemies that it charged. Is it a good stratagem? Absolutely. I think it's a great stratagem when you are charging multiple armigers into a single enemy, like a big enemy target, like an enemy super heavy, an enemy Titanic Knight, a demon, or a giant horde, like a 25 blob of Marines, then this will be very good. The next one is thin their ranks. When? Start of your shooting phase. Target. One Armiger model from your army or one Imperial Knight's Titanic model from your army and one or more friendly Armiger models affected by that model's Bondsman ability. Effect. Until the end of the phase, range weapons equipped by your Armiger models have the Rapid Fire 1 ability. This is an amazing stratagem because it increases your shot volume by a lot. And especially if you have either the Castigator or Warden that gives you sustained hits and you take rerolls, this could end up increasing your damage output very significantly. Now, unlike Virtue of Courage, you don't have to select one enemy unit. Three of your Armigers can target three different enemies and still get Rapid Fire 1 ability. Now, on the Armiger Helverin, a lot of people fast roll all 8 autocannon shots. But if you look at the model, there are actually two separate autocannons. And a lot of people take the stubber, but you can also take a meltagun. So on the Armiger Helverin, let's say it has two autocannons and a stubber. Both of the autocannons, when you're within half range or 24 inches, will get an extra shot because of the Rapid Fire 1 ability. Your stubber now does not get the Rapid Fire 1 ability. And the reason is because it already has Rapid Fire 3. So if you're in half range of the stubber, which is 18 inches, then the stubber goes from 3 shots to 6 shots. So Rapid Fire 1 and Rapid Fire 3, they don't stack on top of each other. It's just the best of the ability. Kind of like sustained hits. You can't stack sustained hits 1 and sustained hits 2 on top of each other. It's just sustained hits 2. So I think that this is great on Helverins, on Moiraxes, and even on Warglaves. Because if your Warglaive is within half range, so 18 inches on the thermal spear, and you are within 9 inches, not only do you get the Melta 4, but you also get an extra shot. So instead of having 2 shots, now you have 3 shots, plus your Melta. And you want to be within half range with your Warglaive anyway. And your Warglaive can take the stubber or the Meltagun. Now, the Meltagun is a 12-inch range, so you want to be within 6 inches to get the Melta 2 buff. And you can also get an extra shot. So you have 2 Meltagun shots instead of 1 Meltagun shot with this stratagem. This is an amazing stratagem, and it increases your Warglaive's output by a lot. But it also works on Moiraxes with double Graviton Pulsars, and it works on Helverins as well. Now, what it doesn't work on is the Moirax with a double Conversion Beamer. The reason why is the Conversion Beamer gets critical hits on a 4 up and has sustained D3 only when you are greater than half range. So you want to be greater than half range so you can get sustained D3, which on average is 2 extra shots when you sustain, and you're critting on 4s. So you don't want to be within half range to get the Rapid Fire 1. Now, there is an argument it could be used because Rapid Fire 1 it's not sustained. So you don't have to roll for it. You just get the extra shot. So when you're within half range with an Armiger Moirax with conversion weapons, then instead of having 2 shots base, now you have 4 shots base. And with the quality that allows you to reroll a hit roll and a wound roll, now you have essentially 5 tries to get a sustained hit. And when you do get a sustained hit, which crits on 6s instead of 4s because you're within half range, not greater than half range, now you can get an extra D3 attacks, or a D3 hits, I mean. So this could work with an Armiger Moirax with conversion beamers as well. Overall, this is a great stratagem. Next one, Exemplar's Wisdom. When your shooting phase just after an Imperial Knight's Titanic model from your army has shot. Target. That Imperial Knight's Titanic model and one or more friendly Armiger models affected by that model's Bondsman ability. Effect. Select one enemy unit hit by one or more of those attacks until the end of the phase. Each time one of your Armiger models makes an attack that targets that enemy unit, improve the armor penetration characteristic of that attack by 1. This is a shitty version of Squire's Duty. Squire's Duty was a stratagem that essentially did exactly the same thing in the Index Noblelands detachment, but it didn't have the extra restriction of an Imperial Knight's Titanic model shooting first. Overall, having extra AP on Armigers are great. This definitely is the best on an Armiger Helverin because the autocannon has -1 AP base. It also works on double Graviton Moiraxes because they also have -1 AP base. It also helps conversion Moiraxes because they have -2 AP base. And in a lot of cases, especially if you don't strip cover, having that extra -3 AP is pretty nice. Against tanks that have a 2-up base save, it's nice. So this is a great stratagem. It is restrictive, just like Virtue of Courage, in that you have to select an enemy unit that was already hit by an Imperial Knight's Titanic model. But the Titanic models with Bondsman abilities that work well in this detachment, they have quite low output themselves against super heavies and even some toughness 12 and higher heavy vehicles. And so having this stratagem allows you to put a lot of damage onto them. And even if you don't kill them, you can use armigers, and the armigers get better armor penetration when they fire after your Titanic model. So this is a great stratagem to have. It's a little worse than Squire's Duty, but it is a new codex and a new detachment, so I would say it's not bad. Next one, let duty be your shield. When your opponent's shooting phase just after an enemy unit has selected its targets. This is a defensive stratagem and it's amazing. Target one Armiger unit from your army that was selected as a target of one or more of the attacking unit's attacks. Effect, until the end of the phase, each time an attack targets your unit, worsen the armor penetration characteristic of that attack by 1. It's Armor of Contempt. Unfortunately, it only works on one Armiger unit, but it is very nice when you play with the Knight Defender, and it combos well because the Knight Defender gives you -1 to incoming damage. So you put that on Armiger, you send him out to the midboard objective in No Man's Land, and you just park him on the objective. And let's say you're playing against a shooty army and they come out with a bunch of last cannons that have -3 AP. You happen to be in cover, and now you use let duty be your shield. That last cannon is firing as if it had AP -1. I think that this stratagem Well, it's not that I think, I know that this stratagem only works on things that are AP minus 1, AP minus 2, and AP minus 3. It doesn't work on AP minus 0. Why? Because it worsens the opponent's armor penetration characteristic. So it's not like benefit of cover that benefits your save. You're worsening their armor penetration characteristic, so it doesn't work against things like mortars that have 0 AP. It's also completely useless against things that have AP minus 4 or greater because you have a 5-up invul save. So it's a great stratagem to use against AP minus 1, AP minus 2, AP minus 3 attacks. Next one is Mantle of the Mentor. When start of your shooting phase, target one Armiger model from your army or one Imperial Knights Titanic model from your army and one or more friendly Armiger models affected by that model's bondsman ability effect until the end of the phase. Your Armiger models are eligible to shoot in a turn in which they fell back. This is amazing, and you could do it two ways. First is you bond an Armiger, like a Warglaive, with a Knight Defender. Send him out to the midboard. Let's say he gets charged. It's a melee army. You don't get to use let duty be your shield. It's a melee army. They charge you. You survive. Well, you could fall back and shoot. It's a Warglaive. And when you fall back and shoot, if you have an extra CP, you can use thin their ranks. And on that Warglaive, you can get an extra thermal spear shot and you can get an extra melt-a-gun shot. So Mantle of the Mentor can be used defensively in a way where you bait them out, they charge you, they can't kill you because you're too tough, and then when it comes around back to your turn, you can fall back and shoot. Now, this applies to all Armiger models that were bonded by one Imperial Knights Titanic model. It doesn't have a restriction on falling back from a specific enemy unit. So let's say you're in combat with 3 different enemy units, with 3 Armigers that were bonded by one Knight Defender. Now, you could use this stratagem. They can fall back, and then at the start of your shooting phase, you use this stratagem, they can shoot. Now, it doesn't allow you to fall back, shoot, and charge. And so we're going to get to a discussion on what I call the in and out strategy, which I used to use in Quest or Forge Pack before Armigers could fall back and shoot. And the in and out strategy, it's used to keep enemies in place. They're constantly in combat with multiple of your units going in. So they charge in, fall back, charge in, fall back. And you got 2 or 3 Armigers doing that to one enemy unit. And they are always locked into combat. So unless they fall back and waste a turn, they're just stuck there. So Mantle of the Mentor is one of the best stratagems that knights could ever get. And the last one is Squires of the Hunt. When end of your opponent's fight phase, target one Armiger model from your army or one Imperial Knights Titanic model from your army and one or more friendly Armiger models affected by that model's bondsman ability. Effect. For each of your Armiger models that is within 9 inches of one or more battlefield edges and not within engagement range of one or more enemy units, remove that Armiger model from the battlefield and place it into strategic reserves. This is the craziest stratagem, and this is what really makes this detachment fucking OP. Now, you don't want to be in engagement range, so you're going to be using this on your range knights, like 3 Helverins. They have 48-inch range on their autocannons. They can be within 9 inches of a board edge and still fire clear across the board. Now imagine this. It's the end of your opponent's fight phase. They didn't get to your Helverins because they're too damn far. 3 Helverins that have been bonded by a Knight Castigator is within 9 inches of the board edge. You pick them all up, and hypothetically, let's say it's scorched earth and the opponent has not screened, or they're playing a elite army like they're enemy knights and there's tons of space on their backfield that you can drop into. If it's turn 3 or later, you can drop in all 3 armigers in their deployment zone and shoot them from the back. This is amazing. If you have that enhancement that gives armigers precision, now you can drop them in where you have prime line of sight on the enemy character you selected and just pick it off. So against guard, against Necrons, this thing's amazing. This is really what makes this detachment from good to like fucking amazing. I love Squires of the Hunt, and if you're really big brained about it, I'm going to show you on some of the sample deployments later. You could really put some hurt into the enemies. In the Imperial Knights army, you don't get to redeploy your battle line units unless you bring RTE breachers. But armigers, they're not even battle line anymore. So RTE breachers can't even redeploy them. So if you want to redeploy Imperial Knights, this is the only way to do it, and you could do it on your first turn because it costs 1 CP. So you could literally leave a flank completely open, let the enemy take that flank, and then pick up some armigers and drop them off and steal that objective. And then the next turn, you could pick up the armigers again and do the same thing all game. This is so OP. It's going to help you get line of sight. It's going to help you kill the character that you selected as part of your deed. And this is going to help you just have so much more board control than you would have. Now, in the Index Detachment Noble Lance, there was an enhancement you could give to a Titanic Knight to pick them up and put them down with Deep Strike. So this one, it doesn't give armigers Deep Strike. They're only in strategic reserves, but from turn 3 onwards, you can invade their deployment zone. So if you're playing Scorched Earth, for example, I love Scorched Earth. I just like burning shit. And so this really helps you score your primary. It helps you swing the game. And if you fucked up your deployment because you're a noob and you suck, well, this can help you fix that a little bit. And I do like the Cerastus Knights, like the Knight Castigator, because they have a fast 12-inch movement. And so if you pick them up and drop them off, in a turn or two, you can get back to your armigers to bond them again. So this is pretty good. This is another reason why I like to play 2 bigs. At least 2 bigs. Well, exactly 2 bigs, and we'll get to the points later. But you have 2 bigs on either side of the board. You can pick up armigers because they've been bonded, and then just throw them on the other side of the board for a turn. Pick them up again because they've been bonded by the other Titanic Knight, and then throw them back over where they first were. So you can really move up to 3 armigers across the entire board all game if you wanted. This is insane. It's so good for big brain play, and it's so good for fixing mistakes in your deployment as well. This detachment, I think, is a very easy to learn, hard to master detachment. But when you do master it, people are going to cry. They're going to cry so hard, you're going to have to give them burn cream at the end of the Scorched Earth match because all the objectives have been burnt by you. If you can't burn objectives while playing this detachment, you're playing it wrong. You should be able to terraform, burn objectives, prevent the enemy from guarding objectives and linchpin. You can do so much denial. I love this detachment, and since after the new data slate changes to Valor Strike Lance, I don't think Valor Strike Lance is that competitive. I think that Spearhead at Arms is really the best detachment all around for both new players and experienced players. So now we're in the list building part of the video. We're gonna go over the right side first, which are my notes, and then I'll give you two of the sample lists, with the first one being the list we're gonna use for our map study. So first off, the auto-include units in this list are the Knight Defender. You need him for that -1 to incoming damage bondsman ability, because against anything less than dedicated anti-tank fire, it makes the armigers a lot more durable. And then if you're not bringing the Night Warden, you should probably bring an Immolator. The reason is that a lot of the knights and armigers you're taking, they have low AP. They have less than -3 AP. And so that Immolator can help strip cover so that you don't lose any of that valuable AP. Now, there is a stratagem that can give armigers -1 AP against a target that a Titanic model has already shot at, but that'll put armigers at -1 AP to -2 AP. If you bring a Knight Castigator, you can add another one, -3 AP. But against Imperial guard tanks, a lot of them have save values of 2 up, and some of the Space Marine tanks also have save values of 2 up. So having an Immolator to strip cover makes you keep all that valuable AP, because you're not getting more than -3 AP on the Armiger Helverins, autocannons, and stubbers, for example. The next one is Mentor's Pride. That one is the enhancement for 20 points that gives you reroll ones to your armigers if at least 2 of them are bonded. So that helps increase your damage output a lot. And it works well with the Oath quality that lets you reroll 1 hit roll and reroll 1 wound roll. And that's because you already reroll hit rolls of 1, but you're hitting on a 3 natively. So if you roll a 2, you can reroll that with your Oath quality ability. So I say, in order to increase damage on your armigers and squeeze the maximum efficiency out of them, the Knight Defender, the Immolator, Mentor's Pride, and taking the Oath quality of rerolls is very important. The good choices that I recommend for the types of lists that I like to play are the following. The Castigator. He gives armigers sustained hits, 1, and gives them -1 AP. And remember, in this detachment, you can bond up to 3 armigers. So that means that 3 armigers can have sustained hits, 1, which mathematically is as if you got an extra hit, and your armigers get -1 AP. Sure, you can use this on an armiger warglaive, but since this bondsman ability only affects knights in the shooting phase, I think it's more important and more effective to put them on armiger Helverins and ranged Moiraxes. Next up is the Knight Paladin. Its bondsman ability gives lethal hits and lance. So lethals work in ranged and melee. Lance only works in melee if you've made a charge move. So if you're bringing a lot of Armiger Warglaives in your list, the Paladin might be okay, because the Armiger Warglaive datasheet, which I will show you on the screen, has changed from the index. Instead of getting sustained hits on the charge, now it just increases the base number of attacks on the charge. The Armiger Warglave's Chain Cleaver is strength 10. So against heavier targets like Leman Russes or Rogel Thorns or even super heavies or Stompas, it's going to be wounding on a 5 up. But Lance gives you +1 to wound when you charge. So you want to make the charge anyway, because you get the extra attacks. So Lance works well with the Armiger Warglaive. It also works with the Armiger Moirax's Siege Claw, because let's say you're attacking a Rogel Thorn. The Siege Claw has strength 12. So having Lance on it means if the Moirax charge the Rogaldorn, it's going to be wounding on 3 up instead of 4 up. So Lance is very nice to have. And so, since a lot of these armigers have low strength on their guns, Paladin helps the armigers punch up into higher targets. Instead of the Paladin, you can take the Knight Magera. The Knight Magera gives +1 to strength and -1 to AP. And so it takes a role that's between a Castigator and a Paladin. On a Helverin, sometimes it might be nice to have strength 10 instead of strength 9 against Doomsday Arcs, for example, or other Necron Arcs that have toughness 9. The extra strength is pretty much adding 1 to your wound roll. On the Moirax, it doesn't really matter if you're bringing the double Graviton Pulsars, but it might matter because double Graviton Pulsars have Blast, and they have strength 7, AP -1, and 2 damage. It also has anti-vehicle 2 up. So when you're firing at vehicles, the Magera Bondsman does absolutely nothing. But when you're firing against Space Marines, for example, instead of wounding on 3s by being higher, 7 is higher than 4, but not quite double, when you add an extra strength to the Moirax's Graviton Pulsars, now it has strength 8, and it is as if you're adding a wound roll against Space Marines. Since Space Marines have a save value of 3 up, the Magera gives it extra AP, so now you have -2 AP on your Graviton Pulsar, and if it's a big blob, and your Magera happens to fire at the blob of Space Marines, now you can use the stratagem and give the Armiger Moirax an additional AP. So you have up to -3 AP against Space Marines, and if they don't have cover, or if you strip cover, they're saving on a 6 up. You do exactly 2 damage, which will kill the Space Marine unless they have a Feel No Pain in certain detachments with certain characters and certain enhancements. But typically, you'll be killing a Marine with every successful shot. They're going to be saving on a 6 up, and you're going to be wounding on 2s. So you're going to be wounding vehicles on 2s, and you're going to be wounding Marines on 2s. So the Magera, it can be useful. I prefer the Castigator because I think sustained hits is a lot better than having +1 strength into certain targets. But the Magera's ability allows it to repair itself. So the Megara, it is useful. It's cheaper than the Castigator and more expensive than the Paladin. So if you own one and you like the model, you could definitely play it. The next one is the Knight Gallant. The Knight Gallant is good if you're focusing on Armiger Warglaves and Moiraxes with Siege Claws, and you're playing a very melee heavy Armiger list. And I don't recommend it, but if you like a very melee heavy list, the Gallant has an amazing bondsman ability. It lets you reroll charge rolls and it lets you reroll hit rolls in the fight phase. Now, the Gallant is not very useful with the Mentor's Pride enhancement because it's kind of redundant. If it's Warglaive or a Moirax, then Mentor's Pride will help it in the shooting phase, but in the fight phase, the Gallant already gives you reroll hits to fight, so Mentor's Pride loses value there. But the Gallant is amazing. The next one is Night Warden. Night Warden is 10 points cheaper than the Night Castigator, and it's very similar. You have sustain hits and ignores cover as the Bondsman ability. So if you do bring a Night Warden, then the Immolator's not really needed. It loses value because you're stripping cover just for the Titanic Knights shooting, not the Armiger shooting as well. So I prefer the Castigator with the Immolator, but if you have a Warden and you don't have a Castigator, I think a Warden is an amazing choice for this list. Bad choices. The Acheron. The Acheron's just always bad. It has very low damage output and it's way too expensive for what it does. Next one is the Knight Valiant. it has no ability to get any movement buffs to Titanic units through this detachment. And it has such short range that it's just really bad in this detachment. The only detachment I would recommend the Valiant in is the Valor Strike Lance detachment, and it's still very difficult to use in that detachment now. The Valiant, being a Dominus Knight, also does not have a Bondsman ability, so I think it's just a super waste of 410 points. So don't bring the Valiant. Next one is the Knight Atropos. Traditionally, the Knight Atropos was amazing. He used to be very strong just with his own weapons, and he doesn't need a lot of support. So Atropos was a great choice in the past, but in this detachment, his bondsman ability is so niche that if you bring an Atropos, you're probably not going to be making the most use of the bondsman ability. And so it is a good knight, but I think this is a detachment where a different knight would be a better choice than bringing an Atropos. The next one is Canis Rex. Now, in the past, in the index and in certain detachments that I have discussed, including Valor Strike Lance and Questoris Companions, Canis Rex is freaking amazing. But in the Spearhead at Arms detachment, Canis Rex is a waste of 415 points because he has no bondsman. And like I said about the Valiant, there's no stratagem support for Titanic Knights. So it's as if you're using him as an ally because he can only use the core stratagems and he has no bondsman. So you could bring Canis Rex, but he would be no better in an Imperial Knights army using the Spearhead at Arms detachment than he would be as an ally. So there are better options. Next one is a double conversion Moirax. It doesn't really work well with the rapid fire stratagem, but as I mentioned before, you could use him to make him more flexible and make him more usable at short range as well as at long range. But that stratagem's not really going to increase his firepower much. It's just going to make him a little bit more flexible. So if you're bringing a Moirax and you're bringing conversion weapons, I personally don't recommend it, but you could try it out. And if it goes well, then feel free to leave a comment and let me know. On paper, I just don't think it's very good. The next one, assassins. I think assassins are ridiculously redundant and for their cost, so 85 to 125, I believe. Spending a few more points for an extra armiger, you can do the same job better and get a lot more stratagem support. Next one is the usable knights. These are knights that I don't particularly recommend, but if you have them, they're not terribly bad. The Knight Crusader, it gives you +1 to hit in ranged, so it's not bad. You get a +1 to hit in ranged, and if you give it Mentor's Pride, it gives reroll hit rolls of 1. And the Knight Preceptor, you can reroll wound versus the quarry. So if you're bonding 3 armigers with the Knight Preceptor and playing very aggressively, you can select a quarry as a cheap unit on the front line, destroy it, then you get to choose a different quarry. So as you move up the board, you keep choosing different quarries and get to reroll wounds against them. So I think the Knight Preceptor is usable, but I've never played it in the past and I haven't played it now. I probably won't play it. But if you do have a Canis Rex and you want to run it as a Preceptor because it has the same weapons, just different profiles, but it has a last cutter and it has an option to take a hand that the Canis Rex comes with. So if you have a Canis Rex model and you want to run this detachment and have a better bondsman ability, try out the Knight Preceptor. It might work. It might not work. The next one is Lancer. It gives the bondsman ability of advance and charge. Advance and charge is great. On average, it's going to add 3.5 inches to your movement. But your armigers don't get to shoot because there's no advance and shoot stratagem in this detachment. And I think the Gallant is a lot better because being able to reroll charge rolls increases your average of a charge roll slightly. And you also get to reroll hits in the fight phase. So I think the Gallant is a lot better. But if you do want to bring a Lancer, you're familiar with his play style, you could bring him. It might help out somewhat. Some of the strategies that I used in the past that will become a lot more potent in this detachment is the hunting pack strategy that I used before. So you have one mob as the anchor. So in Quester Forge Pact, I used a couple Ranger squads right on the midboard objective, and then I used them to screen the Knight Valiant behind it. You play a little bit similarly here, except you put two armigers out in the midboard to screen for the defender, who stays in the back within 12 inches so it can constantly bond the armigers. So you have one mob for the anchor. I call it the anchor because they're just there to soak damage. And one thing that's very particular about the Knight Defender datasheet is that it has a 4-up invulnerable save against range. So normally other Questoris chassis have 5-up invulnerable saves, but the Knight Defender has 4-up invulnerable save. And so it's a lot more durable than the other chassis you can bring. And then you have another mob and you use it for fast flanking. The reason I like the Castigator is because it has a 12-inch move and it can move just as far as the armigers can. So you don't have to worry about staying close to each other. The armigers move out and the Castigator can move out behind them, following them at the same distance. I use it for fast flanking. So in the past, I used an Atropos and two Armiger Warglaves, or one Armiger Warglaive, and I put one in reserve just so that I can bring it in turn two behind the Atropos if I need to, or I could put it on the other side of the board to help move block. So in this detachment, I suggest you start all the armigers on the board because you have a stratagem that helps you essentially redeploy them, uppy downy armigers. But those armigers have to have been bonded, or else I believe you can only select one of the armigers. But it's great. So when I was playing in the past with the Atropos, the armigers would move up very aggressively, two armigers on a flank with the Atropos, and they would just destroy everything on the flank and just keep moving past the objective. I usually bring Sisters and Immolator so I could sticky the objectives as I pass it, but I would just pass the objective and just keep flanking as far as I can until I either get destroyed, I need to wrap around and help the Valiant in the midboard, or I can just invade their deployment zone. So you'd play this very similarly, where you have your anchor in the middle and you have a fast flanker on the more undefended flank. And it keeps the armigers together and it keeps them in the same firing lanes for stratagems because in this detachment, instead of using two Warglaves and an Atropos, you're going to be using a Castigator and two Helverins or Moiraxes. The next strategy I used before that was effective and that will become a lot better now is the in and out strategy. So what the in and out strategy is I would have the Atropos and I would have a Warglaive. One of the Warglaves that starts up on the board, he can shoot and charge. And then the same turn, I would have brought in from reserves another Armiger Warglaive that fires at the enemy, but doesn't charge because I brought him in from reserve. Sometimes he might be in range and make a 9-inch charge, but most of the time a 9-inch charge is not very effective, so I get one armiger in. And then the next turn, I would fall back with one of the armigers. I would charge in the armiger that I ingress last turn, and then I would bring in another armiger from reserves. And so by having one armiger fall back, the enemy is now open to shooting. Even if it's an infantry unit, it's open to shooting. The armiger that fell back is kind of wasted But since they're warglaves and they used to get bonuses of sustain 1 on the charge, you would charge in 1 warglaive every single turn and then fall back in armature every single turn until the opponent died. Now you can get fall back and shoot with your armatures. So you can charge in all your armatures at the same time, fall all of them back, and then shoot. So that's the in and out strategy. You always want to be charging with your warglaves because they get bonuses on the charge. So you always want to be charging. If you can tank shock them if you have the CP. And then next turn, you want to fall back and shoot. And that way you can destroy one single tough enemy, or you can destroy large swarms of enemies. And then the last point I wanted to talk about was CP usage. What are you going to use your CP on? Because CP planning and CP management is really important to winning games. So if you're bringing a Castigator or Warden with a Moirax, you're going to be using a lot of Overwatch, and you're going to be using the Overwatch on swarm units. So Guardsmen, Skitarii Rangers, Poxwalkers, even Marines. And that's because Sustain Hits 1 gives you an extra hit when you crit. And when you're firing Overwatch, only crits, so only rolls of 6 up, allow you to hit. So every time you hit in Overwatch, you get 2 hits. And having extra AP or even ignore cover is pretty good in Overwatch because that bondsman goes from command phase to command phase. So you keep that bondsman, and when you Overwatch, it pretty much doubles your Overwatch potency. It's really great if you're using heavy stubbers as well. Next, against gunline armies in particular, let duty be your shield, which is the armor of contempt and shooting. It's going to be useful for -3 AP or worse. So on one armature, you're going to want to use it against gunline armies. And that's the armature you put out to the midboard to bait. If you have extra CP from being honored, or you really need to burn, turn 2 onwards, you can use Squires of the Hunt, which is the uppy downy stratagem, to pick up your armatures and put them in strategic reserves, where next turn you can bring them out of strategic reserves. Or on the opponent's movement phase, at the end, you can rapid ingress it for a CP. I don't know if you're going to have that much CP, but it might be nice to have a rapid ingress so you can get further movement. The Squires of the Hunt is really nice. So turn 3 onwards, you can bring in units from your reserve into their deployment zone. So if you rapid ingress something into their deployment zone, they might even be able to charge. For example, if you pick up a Moirax with a Siege Claw and a Graviton Pulsar, you get to shoot and you can charge if you do get a 9-inch charge off. But it gives you options to be a little bit more aggressive and trick enemies when they don't expect it. Also, Squires of the Hunt is good if you select a character to destroy for your deed, and you happen to also take the precision enhancement. Now you have sniper armatures that when they're bonded, you can pick them up and drop them on the other side of the board to get better angles on picking attached leaders, for example, like Orican or Ursula Creed or a Technomancer off from the enemy lines, and then you can be honored very easily. So Squires of the Hunt is great. You can pick up to 3 armatures that are bonded and within 9 inches of the board edge. So you could just pick up 420 points and drop it somewhere else on the map. So you could also use this to trick the enemy. You could leave a flank wide open and not defend it very well. They might start deploying a lot of stuff on that flank, and then you charge a flank with your armatures. And then after you destroy their weaker flank, you pick up your armatures, put them on the other flank, and start denying primary. So there's a lot of tricks you could use with Squires of the Hunt. You can use it to get sniper angles. You can use it to invade their deployment zone. You can use it to burn their home objective. You can also use it to contest objectives across the map. And then the next one is Mantle of the Mentor, fall back and shoot. If you're playing a lot of melee armigers, which you should, you can fall back and shoot. So against melee armies, you're going to be using that stratagem a lot. And the next one is Virtue of Courage. +1 to hit in the fight phase, thin their ranks, which is the range rapid fire 1, and Exemplar's Wisdom, which is a crap version of the old Squire's Duty. You're going to be using them from time to time. When you do get into a situation to use it, though, don't be too excited to use it. Make sure that you crunch your numbers and know how much average damage your armigers can do to see if you actually need those stratagems. Because movement wins games, and you want to make sure you have CP around to use Squires of the Hunt, because that could end up getting you more victory points in the long run than spamming Thin Their Ranks, for example, or Exemplar's Wisdom. You could spam that, destroy a bunch of units, and still lose the game because you've lost on primary or secondary. If you use Squires of the Hunt after you get honored every single turn and have at least one armiger in reserves, it will help you score location secondaries a lot. Now, it is a lot of CP to burn when you could just bring a Calidus Assassin, but the Calidus Assassin doesn't have as much firepower that your armigers have. So I think that Squires of the Hunt is a lot better, and you should spend the 100 points you would have spent on a Calidus Assassin getting an extra armiger. So my favorite stratagem, of course, it's Squires of the Hunt, but let duty be your shield. Situationally, it might be good because surviving on an objective, if the enemy doesn't have enough OC to contest it, means that you score a primary for that objective when your turn comes around. So, like what some of the wiser players have said in other videos, if there's VP on the line, use a stratagem. And don't be baited into using stratagems like Virtue of Courage or Thin Their Ranks or Exemplar's Wisdom when you don't really need it. All right, let's go to the list now. So, our first list is a list I'll be discussing in a lot more detail with the map studies. I have one Castigator for 395 points. You could also bring a Warden and save yourself 10 points for something else. Knight Defender for 425 points, Mentor's Pride for 20 points, Martial Tuition for 15 points, and Martial Tuition is the one that gives you a 0 CP counteroffensive, so it lets you interrupt in the fight phase. I had extra points left over, so I took that stratagem. I'm going to put Mentor's Pride on the Castigator because the Castigator and his 3 armigers are going to be the main damage dealers in this army. And the Knight Defender is just going to use his armigers to hold point and anchor, like I was talking about earlier. So counteroffensive, it's good on the Knight Defender, so that one of the armigers he bonded, he gets to use the counteroffensive stratagem. And then next up, I have one Squad of Sisters and one Immolator with Bolters. A lot of people like to take Flamers. I used to try them with Meltas, but you want to take Bolters because the role of the Immolator, you only have one of it in your army, is to sit back and provide supporting fire to strip cover. You do come with a bolter and a hunter killer missile, but if you're smart about it and your immolator survives longer than it normally would if you used it as a transport and pushed it up to the front line, you're gonna lose that hunter killer missile. And if you miss your 3 bolter shots, which is it's pretty rare, but if you do miss your 3 bolter shots and you don't get rerolls like the knights do because you're an ally, it's nice to have another bolter. Off of 6 shots, hitting on 3 ups, you're probably not going to miss. It is so rare to miss. And you don't have to do any damage. All you have to do is hit for cover to be stripped. So I have Immolator with bolters, and it stays back a little bit. Later on in the game, as your armigers start getting destroyed, it can come out and start sticking objectives with your sisters. Next, I have 2 Helverins, 2 Warglaves, and 2 Moiraxes. One of them's run with double Graviton, and one of them is run with the Graviton and the Claw. The reason why is one of the Moiraxes will be going with the Castigator, and doing range damage. The other Moirax will be going with the Knight Defender, and he'll be bodyguarding your Warglaive. So if your Warglaive pushes up onto an objective and he gets charged, the Armiger Moirax datasheet gives you a 0 CP heroic intervention. So as long as the opponent is within 6 inches, you can roll a charge roll, and if you get in, then you can fight too. That's why that 0 CP counteroffensive is really nice. So armigers have a 4-inch diameter base. So if your Moirax is right behind your Warglaive and your Warglaive gets tagged in melee, most likely you'll be within 6 inches because the rules say that when you charge, if you can make base to base contact, you have to make base to base contact. So all you have to do is travel less than half the circumference of an Armiger Warglaive. And so your Moirax will most likely be able to get in with its heroic intervention and be able to add attacks in the opponent's fight phase as well. So that's why I bring one with a Graviton Pulsar and a Claw, and I bring the other one with double Graviton Pulsars, and that one's going to be running with the Castigator. Last of all, we have a Priest. I had extra points, didn't know what to spend it on. I think I had 70 points at the end. I could get a squad of Voidsmen, but I was thinking maybe 15 points for the Martial Tuition enhancement and a Priest would be better. And I have 15 points left in the list, and that's not too uncommon for Imperial Knights lists. The next one, we reach exactly 2,000 points, and you bring a Knight Defender, and you bring a Paladin instead of a Castigator. You bring Mentor's Pride, one Squad of Sisters, one Immolator, one Helverin, three Warglaives, and two Moiraxes. And now, because your Knight Castigator was 395 points and the Paladin's 375 points, you save 20 points. And so I used that to get an Exaction Squad. Whereas Voidsmen have a few models, so I don't think they're really that worth it for their points. The Exaction Squad has 11 models. It has 10 men and one dog. So for 90 points, you can get pretty much a whole infantry unit that you can use to hold objectives that you have taken or to contest objectives and put more OC on it. So the Exaction Squad is great for that role, and it brings you out to exactly 2,000 points. In this list, you don't take Martial Tuition, but it's just a different list you can try out. Now we're going to move on to some Armiger calculations. So before we go on to the Armiger calculations, here you can pause the video and take a quick peek at how much average damage a Knight Defender can do to different targets. So we have the super heavy without a Tech Priest, Dominus Knight, Questorus Knight, Rogaldorn or a Land Raider. That's a Rogaldorn commander without the blank. Vindicator, Demon, Armiger. Ooh, I messed up here. These are some old numbers. I better change that. The Armiger's toughness 9 now, so it got worse. The Dominus Knight, I already changed him, but not the Armiger. It doesn't matter because the Defender's conversion weapon is strength 12, so whether it's toughness 10 or 9, it doesn't matter at all. It's the same numbers. Next one is Necron Arcs, Custodes, Thunderwolves, Terminators, Marines, and Guardsmen. So you can see the number of successful attacks and then the average damage that it'll do. For Marines and Guardsmen, it doesn't really matter how much damage you're doing. All that matters is the number of successful shots because each shot that gets through has to save, of course, is one dead Marine or Guardsman, and damage doesn't spill over. So towards the bottom, number of successes matter more than the damage number. But towards the top, where it's a single model unit with a lot of different wounds, the average damage does matter. And you can see here as we get to toughness 13, the Knight Defender doesn't really do much damage. It shines at toughness 11 and lower targets. And then here are some numbers on the plasma overcharge, because most people don't fire plasma weapons other than when they're overcharged. And the average damage numbers are pretty low. The Knight Defender is there just for the Bondsman ability. Next one, we got a chart with the Moirax bonded by a Castigator with Sustain 1, -1 AP, using the Reroll 1's enhancement and the 1 CP Rapid Fire 1. And on the right, we have the Armiger Helverin with the same buffs. And you can see that towards the top, towards heavier targets, the Moirax does a lot of damage when it's maximally buffed. And when you get towards the bottom, the Moirax actually kills a lot more chaff than the Helverin can. But the Helverin's a lot more effective against Terminator equivalents. Next one is melee. Comparison of the Moirax and the Warglaive with the reroll 1's enhancement and the 1 CP +1 to hit. You can see here that the Moirax near the top is a lot better than the Warglaive at hitting heavier targets, but the Warglaive gets better towards the bottom. A Moirax can kill a little more than 3 guardsmen. A Warglaive can kill 8 with his sweep profile. So they have different roles, and that's why I take 2 of each. 2 Moiraxes, 2 Warglaives. And I mix it up so that I can be more flexible depending on what army I'm playing against. And then down here is some numbers on a Warglaive's ranged attacks that are buffed by the Castigator. Not too impressive average numbers. And down here, we have incoming damage comparisons. So this is an Armiger that has -1 damage bondsman by the Knight Defender, and it shows the amount of damage that certain units can put into it. And then it shows the same numbers when it's not bonded, not in cover, and not using the Armor of Contempt stratagem. And at the bottom, we have the stratagem that gives the opponent -1 to incoming AP. You have cover, and you have the -1 damage bondsman ability. So you can see the difference here. When it has no buffs on it, it takes around 10.5 last cannons, 14 auto cannons, or 16.8 heavy bolters to destroy an Armiger. And I put 5 twin heavy bolters just to show you how much damage a super heavy's twin heavy bolters can do to Armigers. Almost 7 average damage. And then when it has the -1 incoming damage, suddenly it requires 3 more last cannon shots, 7 more auto cannon shots, well, 7 more auto cannons with 2 shots each, and 33.6 heavy bolters. It more than doubles because -1 damage has a lot more effect on 2 damage weapons. And you can see here that it cuts the twin heavy bolter damage down to about 3.5. Down here, when you have fully buffed, it takes 18 last cannons, 31.5 auto cannons, and 50.4 heavy bolters. And down here, a super heavy against a fully supported Armiger only does 2.315 damage with its 5 twin heavy bolters. So you could cut damage down from almost 7 to around 2. I think that's pretty significant. So Armigers, they got nerfed, but due to this detachment being able to bond 3 Armigers and give them all -1 incoming damage, I would say it's somewhat of a buff in this detachment only. So now we're going to do some map studies. The first map we're going to discuss is Tipping Point on GW Terrain Layout 4. It looks a lot crazy, but I will explain in detail. So the red ones are the Armiger Warglaives. The orange ones are the Armiger Moirax, and the yellow ones are the Armiger Helverins. I should have put them blue, but it might interfere with the ruins. So I just made them yellow. And then the brick here is the Knight Defender, and the red polka dotted one is the Knight Castigator. In this deployment, first of all, we have to make sure that 3 armigers are within 12 inches of either of the Titanic Knights. That way they can get bonded. And we made sure that in this deployment, these 3 armigers are within range of the Castigator, and these 3 armigers are within range of the Defender. Now, the Defender could bond the Helverin if he wanted to later, but these are the 3 armigers he will bond first. So this Warglaive is stationed so that with a regular 12-inch move, he could touch that ruin. So the darker ones are the initial deployment, and the lighter ones are where they could go. So this one with a 12-inch move, he could get onto that objective in case you need to do a cleanse or something. And we did consider firing lanes, which is why I put him here. If you put this Warglaive up into the blue ruin, now the opponent can get line of sight on him, and he can get fired at from the middle. And if he happens to die, then you just lost the armiger that was going to score you cleanse. So he's staying hidden. The armiger Moirax is here, and the armiger Warglaive is here. This guy, he's completely behind the ruin, out of line of sight, but the first turn with a regular move, he can get onto that objective to score you a small established locus or another cleanse. The armiger Moirax with the claw is right behind him, and he gets bonded with a -1 damage, and he comes out right behind the armiger Warglaive, so that if the Warglaive does get charged, now there's another armiger that's equally as durable who can use heroic intervention for free. So having a bodyguard armiger might help against certain opponents. However, since he's here, he can also go up and support the top side as well, if that's needed. The Knight Defender is here. He's hidden behind the ruin, away from the prying eyes of the enemy. However, do note that if the enemy goes first and they deploy inside this blue ruin, both of these armigers and the Knight Defender can be shot turn 1. So that is a risk that you're taking. But it's not the worst risk, because this ruin is actually somewhat of a kill zone, even though I didn't mark it with these blue X's. The blue X's and the pink area is a general kill zone where you want to bait your enemies out into being so that you can destroy them completely next turn. This armiger Helverin, due to the constraints of space, is peeking out a little bit. He can get shot from the middle. He is bait. If he does get shot from the middle, both of these armigers can come out in the middle. The Knight Defender can step into the ruin, and you can have a Warglaive, a Moirax, and a Knight Defender all firing into that zone where the enemy needs to be able to hit that Helverin. There's another Helverin deployed right underneath him. He is protected by this ruin. He is not touching the ruin at all. And if it is needed, he can move down here and put some firepower into the bottom right corner, or he can also move into the middle firing lane and put extra firepower bonded by the Castigator into that essentially middle of the enemy's deployment kill zone. The second armiger Helverin could probably also fit there because these 2 armigers are moving out. These 2 Helverins could move up to roughly around where these 2 armigers are and fire into the middle. Down here we have a Moirax. The Moirax has a short range, so we want to move him out as far as possible. And a 24-inch Overwatch can hit somewhat into their front line. So if you go first and you put a Helverin here and a Moirax here, this Helverin is completely within that ruin, which means he can fire out of it. Also, the Helverin autocannons are quite long. You can stick them out of the ruin and get extra distance if you want. But this Helverin and this Moirax are able to overwatch most of No Man's Land. So overwatch can happen before a move, after a move, before a charge, and after a charge. Well, it cannot happen after a charge because you would be engaged. So it happens before the movement, after movement, and before charging. And so if you have overwatch that can reach their front line, and you have sustain 1 and AP minus 1, a bonus AP minus 1, that is. If they move off the front line, you can overwatch them and hit them on their turn. So it is very powerful. Here, the Moirax is here, and he might not have any line of sight behind this ruin. But once the opponent comes out to take their natural expansion objective, once their foot touches that ruin, the Moirax can fire at the entire unit within. So if they have a unit of Catachans or Skitarii Rangers, well, they can scout out, but their scout move doesn't allow them to touch the objective. So if they want to touch that objective and beyond that objective, the Moirax can cover the bottom. So if they come out into here on the bottom side of the ruin, the Moirax can overwatch them. And if they try to come out on the top side of the ruin to take that objective, the Helverin can overwatch them. So that's very powerful. And after they do their thing, next turn you're going to have a significant clapback because you have another Helverin and you have the Knight Castigator, who's pretty potent in melee as well. So this is a good position to kind of deny their natural expansion objective. Now, one thing to note is that if you position this Helverin correctly in the ruin, all three of the bonded armigers that are bonded by the Castigator are within 9 inches of the board edge. You can pay 1 CP, pick them up, and redeploy them all the way in the north. It looks a little light here, so the opponent might deploy behind this ruin up in the top, and he might come out to take your natural expansion objective. But it's your natural expansion objective for a reason. You can pick these 3 armigers up and deploy them within 6 inches of the board edge, even in your deployment zone if you need to. So if they pass that ruin, they're getting fired on. If they stay outside this ruin, you could still rapid ingress one of them, and then next turn move and fire on them. So you could bring all your ranged armigers and essentially redeploy them in the middle of the battle on the whole other side of the battlefield. So that's another reason for keeping these 3 armigers somewhere near the bottom. That way you can pick them up and redeploy them when you want. If it's turn 3 onwards and your bottom ranged armigers have survived until then, you can also pick them up and start invading their deployment zone. So if you pull a secondary objective of behind enemy lines and you happen to pick up 3 armigers, you can put 2 of them if you have enough space. You can put 2 of them in the opponent's deployment zone and score big secondary of behind enemy lines. If you pull Established Locus way later in the game and you happen to have an armiger that's bonded near the edge somewhere, you could pick up that armiger and then the turn before, of course, and put it in the enemy deployment zone and score the big Established Locus. So there are a lot of choices. Here, it's a very flexible army. You really can't mess up. The only way you would really mess up is losing your ranged armigers too early. You want to make sure that they're set up in defensible areas for Overwatch and that you can always clap back with an armiger. And you want to make sure that you're baiting with the armigers that are bonded by the Knight Defender. And if you do that, and keep in mind, keeping at least an armiger that's able to be bonded near a board edge, you should be able to score a lot of the location secondaries. You're playing knights, so kill secondaries should be really easy. And you have 6 armigers, so every turn the Knight Defender can bond 3 of them to become very durable. So your primary game should be pretty solid as well. Now, the last thing we're going to talk about are the Battle Sisters. And we keep the immolator back here. It might be a weird place to deploy, but do note that it has a very fast 12-inch move. You can move it up here and strip cover on a target up top here. You can move it right to the middle, go around that ruin, and strip cover from that dead zone in the middle. It can also strip cover from that blue ruin. So if they come out to the blue ruin to shoot you, you can move the armigers out and you can put the immolator right here, strip the cover because they're going to have cover if they're wholly within the blue ruin. And then your ranged armigers can go destroy it. It's very easy to get into a firing lane with the Castigator, both Helverins, and even the Moirax. If you put the Helverins a little bit up top, maybe 4 or 5 inches up, then both of them can have line of sight into that blue ruin. The Castigator, since he has towering, just has to tow the ruin, and the Moirax goes where this yellow circle is. Instead of going out here, he goes into that yellow circle, and he should have line of sight on more than half of that blue ruin. So that is the deployment on Tipping Point for GW Terrain Layout 4. Now we go down here to Search and Destroy on GW Terrain Layout 6. It looks completely different, but the idea is exactly the same. You keep an Armiger Moirax here this time, and the reason why is if there's an opponent deployed further back here hiding, you want that Moirax to be able to use its 24-inch range to hit that up there. I would suggest using a Claw Armiger unless you're facing a Gunline army. And this Moirax is going to be bonded by the Knight Defender in front of it. There will be a Armiger Warglaive here. Here we have a very aggressive deployment, and you're going to get hit by melee pressure armies, but it doesn't matter because you have fall back and shoot. So this Warglaive is right here in the middle, and if the opponent deploys in the kill zone here, it's very easy to get line of sight on that Warglaive. And if the opponent goes first, that Warglaive is going to die because he is not bonded, because you bond in your command phase. So that Warglaive will die. But as you can see in this map, if the enemy goes into that kill zone, you can have the Knight Defender, the Knight Castigator, and this other Warglaive come out and fire on it. So you have 2 Titanic Knights and an Armiger. The Immolator deploys right behind this ruin, so all he has to do is drive out a little bit, make sure you have line of sight, and use your Hunter Killer or your Heavy Bolters to strip cover from that target. And down here, you have 3 ranged Armigers again. You have the Moirax here, and you have 2 Helverins. All 3 of the Armigers can get into that middle firing lane. So you have nearly 2,000 points going into the middle of their deployment zone. So if the enemy is playing tower guard, do you want to peek to try to kill that Armiger? Maybe, maybe not. But if you peek with something like a Baneblade, that Baneblade is going down in one phase. Easily. Now this Moirax, I started here instead of all the way at the bottom here, because I want this Moirax that's going to be bonded by the Castigator to be able to move out and provide some fire support into the middle because he has a lower range than the Helverin. While Moirax's Graviton Pulsar has a 24-inch range, the Helverin's autocannons have a 48-inch range. But he can also move towards the bottom, set up to get line of sight, and hit towards this way and set up for Overwatch as well. The 2 Helverins, they can move out, and the Castigator can move out right behind them, and you can have all of them combine fire into this kill zone right here. So if they deploy on the line, ready to charge behind these ruins where they will be safe from your fire, but you get lucky and you go first, anything on that front line is going to get shredded. So if they do deploy on that front line there, they're taking a big risk. If they do go first and manage to get behind these ruins, you have no chance for shooting them. And the best thing you do is back out into this corner and just wait for Overwatch. So that's essentially the playstyle. Now do note, if you move here with your Armigers and your Knight Castigator, you do have an angle all the way up here. So if they deploy on the front line here and not within the ruin, like a smart player will, then they could take heavy range firepower all across the board. So does it matter that much that you're only putting 1 Armiger Moirax to defend your natural expansion objective? No, it doesn't matter that much. Because remember, these 2 Helverins, if you can manage to keep them within 9 inches of the board edge, they can come back up here and help put more firepower into anything that contests your natural expansion objective. So it doesn't matter that much that you're only putting one Moirax. In fact, that one Moirax might be bait. The opponent, if they're not familiar with your detachment, they might think, okay, that Moirax doesn't have a lot of firepower. There's no way they can clear out this big wave of Corn Berserkers, so I'm just going to park right behind here, this ruin. Or maybe they make it inside the ruin by advancing or something, and they think they're safe, but they're not safe because they can easily get shot by two Armiger Helverins that appear, and the Moirax can do some damage too. And since both Armiger Helverins are up here, if the Knight Defender moves in such a way that one of them is within his bondsman range, the defender on the other side of the board can bond the Armiger Helverin, and it doesn't matter as much about the -1 to incoming damage. What it does is allow that Armiger to be picked up and redeployed next turn. So for me, I like to have one knight on one side, the other knight on the other side. That way you can keep swapping armigers back and forth. Whichever armiger you need. I'm taking two of each. So whichever armiger you need, as long as they're close to the board edge, you get to pick them up and move them over to the other side. And so it gives you a lot of flexibility. Now in this map, since you can't reach the opponent's natural expansion objective, you might want to sit back a little bit, wait, pick up your armigers, and if they haven't screened correctly, you might be able to find a place to drop in armigers back here. Like if they're actually sitting on the actual objective, then your armigers could drop into this corner and provide firepower into anything that's touching the ruin. Or if you rapid ingress it, they can rapid ingress into the corner, move into one of the blue ruins, and then fire towards the outside. And since you rapid ingressed it, they can also charge if you happen to bring an Armiger Moirax with a claw or an Armiger Warglaive and you rapid ingress that one. Personally, if you have a choice of using rapid ingress on an Armiger, I would use it on a Warglaive because the Meltas are really short range and you do want to be able to move and get a little bit closer to be within Melta range and then be able to charge. So that's why I highly recommend rapid ingressing Armiger Warglaives. Helverins pick up and move stuff. It's better for just getting lines of sight so you can get different angles on the opponent. They might be hiding behind a ruin and suddenly you show up and be like, ha, gotcha. A lot of people say gotchas are bad, but you tell the opponent, hey, I can pick up armigers and I can drop them off. You tell the opponent, and if they're not familiar with your army, they might still mess up. So don't hide things from your opponent. Tell them, but you can still get gotchas on them because they might not be familiar with armigers picking up and putting down where they can get insane lines of sight. Now, do note that the command phase comes before the movement phase. So if you have the stratagem with precision, you're not going to be able to use it right away after you deploy out of strategic reserve. So if you don't rapid ingress it, you're not going to get the bonded precision. If you rapid ingress it though, now you're already on the board in the opponent's turn, not on your turn. So when it comes around to your command phase, now it can get bonded. So if you are honored and you're gonna go for a crazy play using the uppy downy stratagem, you might want to save 1 CP for rapid ingress. Just make sure you include that in your plan. Might not be obvious at first if you're a newer player, but if you're more experienced, having 1 CP for rapid ingress might really help you use the armiger that you just picked up to its maximum capability. So anyway, this is our second map study on Search and Destroy Terrain Layout 6. We play every map essentially the same. We have the Knight Defender somewhere near the middle where it can bond two different armigers and one goes up to take the top objective and one goes out to take mid objective. And you keep one back for whatever. You keep an armiger in a flexible position So he can go up top or he can go to the middle, whichever is required. And you have 3 ranged armigers at the bottom near the edge that can get bonded by the Castigator turn 1. And you're setting up for Overwatch and getting good angles. And the Immolator deploys somewhere near the middle so that you can move into multiple firing lanes and use your heavy bolters and your hunter killer missile to strip cover. It's a very simple play style. It's not very complicated. You don't have a lot to worry about. It's really hard to mess up playing a normal primary game with this detachment. It's really hard. You can mess up some of your moves that you're trying to do with the uppy downy of armigers. You might mess that up, especially if the opponent's really good at screening. But just a general primary game, bond the armigers, send them out, have them sit on objectives. Next turn, replace the armigers with new armigers that sit on objective. It's really simple, dirt easy play style. So if you're a new player, definitely recommend starting out with this detachment. And if you're an experienced player who hasn't put a lot of time or thought into this detachment, even though it's armigers and they don't look very strong, I would suggest looking at this detachment and definitely getting a Knight Defender. Now, if anybody's looking for files, feel free to message me if you're interested in the files. And if you want somebody to do commission, I can recommend a guy. I'll include his shop at the end of the video. And when I get to it, I will include him down in the description of the video as well if you want a full commission, fully painted, tabletop ready, just based, ready to go. And that way, if you don't have a Knight Defender, or if you're like me and you don't like painting, then you can have it done for you for a reasonable cost in a reasonable amount of time. So thanks all for watching. Praise the machine god as always, and I hope you have great success in your next games using the Spearhead at Arms detachment. Have a great day. To the god of all machines, his secret designs are supreme.